All right. Dean Linden here from rainy Seattle, Washington. Joining me is Ken MacLean, president of Luxfolio Holdings. What's been going on with Luxfolio? What's the latest? We've been trying to connect for probably 2 weeks. You're the busiest man in show business.
Hmm.
What can you tell us about?
As always, there's a lot in flux in the world, and whether it's inflation or the war, crypto's just trying to roll along. But for us, we have something that people want, and that's the infrastructure on our continued build out of capacity and of green power, which is today's topic. And deals are finding their ways to us, and we're in an enviable position where we've done a capital raise, we have infrastructure built out, we have miners on the way, and deals are coming to us, and we don't have to reach for any of them. We can do good business. So we're looking at each and every one of these things and trying to make sense of what works for us in 2022.
So as groups are coming to Lux, and is it how much of it is the attraction to our ESG commitment? How much, like our commitment to green power? How much of that is going on in discussions, whether it be with people looking to sort of be hosted by us, or people to do any type of business with us? Is that becoming more of a focus or less of a focus?
It's an interesting question because there are a number of ETF funds. We've done some presentations to groups that have to invest in green power. That's their mandate as a fund. And there's one out of Toronto, as a Canadian-based company out of Toronto. They have to have a certain amount of companies. So we presented to them. We only find out next quarter whether they took a position or not. So we'll find out on that. I think, tangentially, with regulation coming to crypto, which is, I think, a phenomenal thing, that's driving more interest in. That's the secret sauce that we've needed to get this next escalation. And so with higher quality, I shouldn't say higher quality, with bigger institutions wanting to come into this, they're going to mandate and they're going to absolutely require ESG to be part of that foundational investment. So
It's so strange, Ken, that I agree with your take on that, but there is so
strange
many.
Strange that you agree.
Well, it's strange. That's even stranger that I agree. But this, when you talk to people who kind of have this peripheral understanding of the Bitcoin industry, they're going to go, "Oh, well, it's the regulation's going to come in." And I think what they're meaning is they think that this is like completely the Wild West. It's not being taxed. And it's in fact not the truth. And regulation will put the guardrails up on it, so the billion and trillion dollar funds can come and go, oh, okay, we know the rules now, let's invest. And that, for a little playpen that's as small as Bitcoin mining is, when you insert billion and trillion dollar players, it changes the game a lot for the better for all of the people that are early adopters.
No, anecdotally to that, we just did an update to some of our institutional investors last week, and I was using an anecdotal comment from our custodian, which is I think the third largest custodian, Anchorage, and they are saying there's just a lineup, a backlog for them to get institutional people onboarded.
Yeah.
So there's more money, more scale, and people that are seeing this and they're trying to get ready and get ahead of it. So I agree with you. You're going to just see trillions of assets out of there, and they're going to mandate a different level of quality, operational quality. And again, going back to the ESG.
And again, you said something before that I think is important to reiterate. Those big institutions are going to start and likely finish with investments in companies that are adhering to strong ESG policies. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I agree.
Yeah. It's now the other, the social aspect of it. I've really enjoyed over the years, or over a year or so, talking about the social aspects of Bitcoin in general and Luxfolio specifically. A lot of the things I get super excited about is this idea that, from a lending perspective or from a banking perspective, the billions of people around the world that don't have, banks and or unbanked, will now have the opportunity for the first time in their lives to have that, those services, and what, how much that can change things. I go on and on and on about that a lot, but that's really something that gets me pretty jacked up. Specifically Luxfolio and this deal with the Navajo, we have kind of an interesting little wrinkle on that, a very specific, a real project there that is particular. I find it particularly exciting. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. The Navajo Nation, I think, is one of our kind of distinct, unique, and exclusive relationships, and does differentiate it from other miners. It's kind of part of our story. And we met the Navajo because one of their large coal plants was shutting down, a 2.5 gigawatt plant. And when that plant shut down, NTUA, the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority, which is the nonprofit monopoly that runs utility for the Navajo Nation, that was a significant power load for them that they lost or were losing. And at that, it was 15 megawatts, we took all of it. And so for them, it was stranded power. They were losing a significant customer. And we partnered with them right at the, nearly timed it perfectly, the beginning of peak to the next day, kind of had an agreement and shut down.
Good times, Ken, good times.
Good times. And no better way to create a relationship than through good times, right?
Yeah.
And so we've been with them in good times and bad, and we have such a good, trusted relationship with them. When things were really, really troubled, they stepped up and helped us, let us pay a little bit slower, came in as a true joint venture partner. We put money in together to mine together. It's when we, as Westblock, joined Luxfolio, they can't hold securities as a public company. The Navajo can't hold securities in Canadian companies, so we had to part. But we're one of their largest customers, and we continue to want to do more with them. We've, from the get-go, only hired Navajo Nation people, and we have primarily a woman team. It started with Tiffany and Kenneth, and then they brought some of their family members, and we peak and bulge as we have to bring miners in. But they've been with us from day one. We try to overpay, we give bonuses, we try to treat them with kind of respect and dignity. And for them, for Kenneth and Tiffany and the team, it's great because they don't have to drive 2 hours. We're on their land in Kariai. And so for them, it's a 10, 15-minute drive. What a treat for them to have full-time work and be able to work with that. We also really try to give back to the community. We're on the Kariai land, as I said, and we just gave them a pledge for $20,000 for some new farming equipment. This year, we're also participating with scholarships in the high school. So, we're a good customer, we pay taxes, we pay good employment, and we try to pledge back to the community. And we feel like we're just in an environment that's open for business for us, and they treat us so well. So I feel like it's just, the yes for us is natural. It was kind of a layup for us.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about the concept of stranded power. I think people sort of get this sort of misunderstanding about what, when they talk about ESG and Bitcoin mining, they're like, oh, they're using this power. They're using this power that is, and it's causing, blackouts someplace else. That when you talk about, can you talk a little bit about stranded power? You touched on it with the former coal mine, but can you just sort of expand on that? Because I think it's worthy of people to understand that stranded power is truly stranded. It can't be used by anybody else unless you bring it to them. So can you talk a little bit about that for us?
I mean, you just hit the punchline there. It was going to be unused, and it would have just been fettered away into space. So getting us in, they recapture that revenue, they recapture the profits, the NTUA, they recapture the taxes to the system. So in the absence of us coming in to use that power, they had nowhere to put it. The Navajo Nation is long power and was long power at that time. A bit of that's changing as there's an energy crisis brewing, but we've been pivoting and doing more with solar. And so, the Navajo power, the coal mine wasn't theirs. It was someone else providing power into the Southwest grid. The Navajo has been really trying to build out solar, and solar is always looking for load to make it economical from the beginning. You know, if a solar project's 25, 30 years, we can provide some of that initial load. And what NGUA liked about us going back to that stranded power is we are consistent load 24 hours a day. That is phenomenal for them. They don't have to have peaks. They don't have to worry about to do it. We take it. So
sorry, is it fair to say then that Bitcoin's association with a group like the Navajo, or anybody that's interested in building out more solar or wind on their grid, they are natural early partners to sort of facilitate those investments? Am I overstating?
Yeah, no, that's how we're being approached. So through one of our relationships, through the CEO, Mr. Walter House, the general manager, as he's called, but effectively the CEO of NGUA, we have a great relationship into another area in the Southwest, and they're using us to create their solar. So they're using us to build ahead, and we're creating this next phase for us. We're negotiating on a 12 megawatt expansion, and it will be all solar. You still have to tie into the grid at night, but that's when when the power is available, and they want someone to actually use that power. It's interesting because we're really digging into the RECs as well, the solar RECs, and these have value and can be sold and traded. One of the other projects we're really looking at around the environmental is going back to kind of the investment from the big companies. They want to know your zero emissions. The reporting, some of the fallacy of reporting around ESG is just, you know, Ford will report, here's our emissions for this. Tesla reports on the Model 3. It's kind of becoming one of those stories. So how do you report truthfully and factually? We're working with a company called Sustainable Bitcoin, and they're trying to create a protocol and a token that if it's on your balance sheet means you're zero emissions. And it will be audited by an NGO that does Apple and Google, does some of the biggest. So Yihan Wu is one of the founder of Bitmain, is one of the founders in this as well. So it has legitimacies. And so trying to bring and create factual stories about the Bitcoin mining industry, because, you know, I think there's so much FUD about us out there in terms of, oh, we use this much power. People won't recognize that we drive the use of green, that we jump in and use stranded powers. Our biggest input is the cost of power. So we go to where there's power that's stranded or inefficient. If there's a use for that power, we can't afford it anyway. So I think that for us, doing things like the sustainable BTC and working with their pilot, we'll share more about that as we dig into it. But we want that on our balance sheet to say, yeah, we take green power now. You know, we're 60% green, however that's measured. But we can actually show through an audited process that we are neutral. We are carbon emission neutral. And
I think that's such a, I'm always amazed when I hear politicians, for whatever reason, sort of, espouse about Bitcoin and its power usage, because, you do not have to dig very far into it before you realize that Bitcoin mining companies cannot not be green ultimately, or not be using stranded power, because as you said, if it's got another use, if there's someplace else that power can go, you can't afford it. And I think that's one of those things that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The other thing is, if for the first time ever, we've got, I'm an Alberta boy too, so you know better than me that oil and gas people want to say, oh, well, solar's never coming because it's this and it's that. But when you've got an industry that actually craves green power, like that, all of a sudden those things, those green power projects become very easy to get off the ground. Your pro forma all of a sudden looks a whole lot different than it did before Bitcoin mining. So I think that's really sort of a underappreciated kind of thing that's actually facilitating the adoption of green energy.
Yep, spot on. I wish I made that point.
Well, I just did. Between the two of us, we can sort of have it.
Yeah, no, it's a very thoughtful point, and I agree with it.
And I just think that there's, whenever I hear, a politician glaze over that, they've got enough resources and enough people that they can talk to that there's no way that there should be a misunderstanding about that at this point in time. Like, I think that should be very, quickly pointed out. And it's a little bit frustrating when I hear, and, that's not to say that there's not a lot of politicians out there that get it for all of its purposes and all of its value, whether it be, social, economic, all those environmental, all those.
That's why that executive order is so such a positive outcome and event as we kind of started it. That will really shine the light on this positively.
Yeah, Ken MacLean, you are currently the busiest man I know. It's been good catching up with you. So that's Ken MacLean, president of LUXFOLIO Holdings and long-suffering Calgary Flames fan. And thanks for joining us.
Good run this year, Dean. Thanks very much for the time. Super interesting topic.
We'll do it again. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, brother. Bye.